But I'm here to tell you that I'm only here standing in front of you by the grace of God. I deserve to either be doing life in prison or in a wheelchair or in hell. And barely, I could have been there. So my life started out here in Sonoma County, and my parents split up when I was young, around 5, and I went to live with my grandparents. And from there on, my grandparents pretty much showed me, some sense of normality, stability, and decency in my life. But there's only so much grandparents can do. And as I got older in high school, I was lacking that family structure and validation that I saw in my friends' lives and whatnot. And I excelled in basketball, but because I was lacking that support group and that family structure at home, I sought it in, I sought to be validated with, friends and, in drugs and gangs. Is eventually where that led me to. And because of those choices that I made, it caused me to drop out of high school and, be involved with gangs and drugs every day, which essentially, soon thereafter, I was on the streets homeless for a time. And, eventually, it kind of got my family's attention, and my dad, talked me into going to Napa Valley College over there. And, I kind of got my act together, so to speak, and, I was going to school there, and I was on the basketball team, and I excelled at that, but I was, had one foot in still with my old friends and that old lifestyle of gangs and drugs, essentially cannabis, which is what I first tried, when I was your guys' age, when I was 16. I thought it was no big deal. I'm sure now that it's even been legalized here in this state, it's even thought of as less of a thing. But, the choices that you make can have a lasting consequence. You open one door, and that's going to lead to another door. And, I'm here to tell you that, from there, because I continued in that, gang lifestyle and drug use, I ended up, being sent to live with a cousin in San Francisco. And I had examples of, the consequences of drugs and alcohol. My mother and my half brother both, suffered much of their lives because of addiction to heroin and cocaine. And so they weren't in my life for most of my life. And basically, I went to San Francisco to pursue a trade, was the plan. But because I was still involved in drugs and gangs, I ended up homeless on the streets of San Francisco. And it's one thing being homeless here where you have some connections where you grew up in Sonoma County, but it's another thing being in a big city. And eventually, I ended up running in, unbeknownst to me, I hadn't seen my mother or my brother in about probably 5 to 10 years. And I ran into them one night when I was on the streets, and I came to find out they were homeless as well in downtown San Francisco. And they were, hopelessly addicted to crack and heroin at that point. And basically, it was the most depressing moment in my life, one of them. And I kind of lost my mind there for a moment, temporary insanity, and I basically made some foolish plan that I was going to get more involved in the drug trade and try to make enough money to get them off the streets so we'd all have a place to stay. And unfortunately, that didn't go as I planned. It worked out for a short season, maybe a few weeks, and eventually one fateful night, around 3 in the morning, I got shot 5 times. The first bullet hit my stomach and went out my back, probably just centimeters from my spinal cord. And, I turned and saw the muzzle flash of a gun 4 more times. I heard 4 more consecutive booms. And by that point, I was already running. And the bullets went through my legs. And so I was sitting there on the concrete leaking out of my body and moments away from death. And I knew, I wasn't going to be going to a good place because, even though my natural father, obligated me to go to church with him off and on in my youth, I saw a lot of hypocrisy in his life and in the churches, and so I rebelled, I rejected it. But I knew there was something real about Jesus Christ for me, and so when I was there, moments away from death, I cried out to him. I said, Lord Jesus, please save me. And, when shootings happen in bad neighborhoods, pretty much everyone just scatters like cockroaches. No one sticks around. And, by the will and the grace of God, he sent this lady, kind-hearted lady at 3 a.m. in a bad neighborhood. She walked up and she asked if I've been shot and if I wanted her to call the ambulance. And I was like just gasping for breath, groaning because of the pain I was in and the shock, being intoxicated. And so, I had a cell phone on me, but I didn't even think to use it because I was so out of my mind. And so basically, I gave her my cell phone and she called the ambulance and they came and scooped me up off the street and took me to the hospital. And by the grace of God, I woke up the next morning with a bunch of tubes sticking out of me. And, I wanted to thank her, but she only left her first name, Rebecca, and that was the only information that was left in the police report. So I truly believe that she was my guardian angel, after I called out to the Lord. And so you'd think that would have been enough to wake me up, but it didn't. I still continued on in my foolish ways, and I made some plans, half-hearted plans to go back to school, but being that I was still, involved in that gang and drug mentality, it never worked. Never fully came to fruition. And plus, they prescribed me opiates, so I was taking pills, and I still was not sober. So things were not working out for me, to say the least. And then I came back here to Sonoma County and found my way back with, in my old neighborhood, my old homeboys, and they all kind of gave me reverence and respect because I've been shot and survived it. And so I kind of had that pride thing going on for a while, but God had to humble me from those years. That was 2006 when I got shot. 2007, I found my way back here, and I was hanging around some of the old homeboys that I had, and unfortunately, sadly, a young 17-year-old precious life was taken by some of them. They shot him with a shotgun, and I was hanging around these guys at the same time, and I barely could have been there with them, when they went and did that. But by the grace of God, He removed me from that situation. And anyhow, as time went on, I lost more friends to the streets. Some got deported, some got life in prison, and some just ended up dying. And I got to a point where I just felt like I was a slave to the drugs and alcohol that I was using, and it wasn't giving me any pleasure anymore. It was just